Pilgrimage to Mecca. The town was full of jostling pilgrims, old and young, male and female, white, yellow, and black. They thronged the old and new parts of the town, seeking provisions for the journey to Mecca, arranging transport to the holy city, waiting for friends whom they had agreed to meet in Mecca perhaps a year and several thousand miles away. Though quite a number of pilgrims march southwards to Mecca by the austere route through the Najd Desert, by far the majority enter Saudi Arabia through Jeddah, either by sea or by way of the new and most impressive aerodrome. The transformation which these people all undergo as soon as they reach the holy country has to be seen to be believed. There is a saying that the pilgrimage makes a good man better, but that it may make a bad man better or worse. Whatever the truth of this may be, there is no doubt at all that a high emotion, akin to nothing which one has felt before, grips even the most westernized of Muslims when they set foot even on the secular soil or sand of Jeddah. Apart from the regular flights of Saudi Arabian Airways and other scheduled arrivals, Jeddah Airport receives an endless succession of chartered aircraft from India, Pakistan, and other Arab lands, even far off Indonesia. The actual atmosphere of the city differs little from that of many other towns of some importance in the Middle East. The same fierce sun is here, beating down upon a mixture of modern steel and concrete office buildings, interspersed with those of the Turkish and Red Sea Arab type. Open-fronted cafes, money changers, sellers of sweetmeats and cool drinks, they are all here. There is a smaller non-Muslim population than in most Arab cities, however. One part of the city contains the magnificent foreign embassies and consulates. It is among the pilgrims themselves that the strange, otherworldly feeling exists. After the first excitement of arriving at long last on Saudi soil had passed, I made the formal vow, the niyyah, which every pilgrim resolves, and felt myself in some unique way cut off from the rest of humanity. Things like the smoking habit, like worrying about what might happen from one hour to the next, or even my future plans, all seemed to dim into a petty and more than welcome insignificance. I stopped writing my diary, found myself almost impelled by a sense of community with tens of thousands of white-robed fellows to read and recite passages from the Islamic scriptures. One felt the need for communion with a mightier, a vaster force than mankind. Although it had been said time and again that the human mind needs some sort of intermediary, whether it be a man or a stick or stone, an idol or picture, to concentrate upon, let alone comprehend divinity, we pilgrims to Mecca felt no such need. We were not there to worship the Kaaba or the Black Stone. We worshipped no man, nor did we accord divine rights or a divine character to anything save one power, which we could not visualize, and did not want or expect to be able to see. Yet in us all was a feeling of contentment, and an underlying excitement that we were about to achieve something that we had all worked for, to arrive somewhere which was dear to our hearts. We were on the verge of fulfillment. That was what we expected, and that was the nature of the sensation which we all experienced when we actually reached Mecca the Holy. I sought out as many of my fellow pilgrims as I could, of diverse origins, both social and otherwise. It would be difficult to name an ethnic group, a social class, or almost any other type which was not represented. Apart from the very large numbers from India, Pakistan, and Indonesia, whence come the majority of foreign pilgrims, I collected Kurds, Bosnians, Hadendoas, Tajiks, and a Japanese. Some had been Jews, others were former Christians. There was an ex-communist who had struck up a great friendship with an extremely wealthy Indian businessman from Kenya. In our sandals and new white robes we explored the fascinating byways of the older part of the city, discussing theology and Islamic history, and exchanging stories from our lives. During these discussions, while we were waiting for our transport arrangements to Mecca, I was able to observe in some detail the change which must have come over these people since they arrived a matter of hours or days ago from the farthest corners of the world. From what they said about their lives, I could tell that some of them, not so long ago, had been of that glib-tongued, thoroughly tiresome group of Middle Eastern intellectuals who know a little about a lot of things and have to pour it all out as soon as they are able to get it into words, which does not take long. Now, dedicated to perform the visit to Mecca and the stoning of the former idols to the north, they spoke and acted with a reasonableness which I am very sure would have surprised even their own families. There were at least 3 wealthy businessmen, one from Mombasa, another with textile interests in Bombay, the third a ship-owner from Dhaka. Different in race and tongue, they carried on their conversations in English. I'm quite convinced that in any commercial contact with these men, their razor-sharp minds would have driven a bargain which no normal person could hope to match. They had that prosperous, horn-rimmed, well-cared-for look, which is the stamp of the tycoon anywhere. 2 of them had arrived in their own aeroplanes. Yet here in the mellow Jeddah night, as we sat by the edge of the curving inland bay, their thoughts and reactions were no different from those of the gentle, untutored servants whom they had brought with them, and whose tasks they shared. This transformation alone is, to my mind, one of the wonders of the pilgrimage. Although I must admit that I was not in a very critical frame of mind, I was immensely impressed by their directness and calm. I never for a moment sensed any suggestion of hypocrisy, any reversion to those mundane matters which must have claimed their daily attention for upwards of 20 years. Almost as fast as they descended upon Jeddah, the pilgrims were making for Mecca, eastwards to the holy city. Like a foaming, surging tidal wave, the sea of humanity moved on and on. Barefoot and carrying packs, mounted on mules and donkeys, perched beneath awnings rigged up on camels, the poorer and more old-fashioned faithful marched. Motor lorries and buses, each one packed to overflowing with pilgrims and yet more pilgrims. Glittering new American cars monopolized the middle of the road, and threw the black macadamized ribbon into moving, coloured relief. From the devout concourse of dedicated humanity came a roar which seemed to cleave the shimmering heat haze with almost physical force. Labbaik, Allahumma, labbaik. Here we are, O Lord, in thy presence. As my car swept past the gold and green princely palaces radiating out from Jeddah's centre, the emotion of the sound and movement of that almost unbelievable multitude gripped me with increasing force. Load after load of white-robed devotees with shaven heads roared past. There were several hundred soldiers, chanting in rhythmic unison, their incisive voices momentarily gaining power over the uncoordinated litany of the pedestrians. Labbaik, Allahumma, labbaik. Labbaik, la sharika lak, labbaik. Inna alhamda wa aniyamata laka wal mulk, la sharika lak. I felt the blood rising in my head as the accented words seized my consciousness as it were in a hypnotic grip. Here we are, O Lord, in thy presence. We are here, none like unto thee. Verily all praise, all power to thee. Thou hast no partner. The absolute indivisibility and possession of all power are, according to Islam, supreme attributes unique to Allah. As the trucks swept past, I noticed upon their sides the sword and date tree, emblem of Saudi Arabia. Under this is the motto, in cursive Arabic letters, No God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. In sluggish contrast to the intense movement along the motorway, comes the unending white flow of pedestrian worshippers, men and women, children and nurses, guides and servants. Why do they walk? Many are poor. Most, however, march this final 50 miles Meccawards either to fulfill a vow, or because they feel that greater humility and piety attach to entering the holy city afoot, as Muhammad did nearly 1400 years ago. Although a conqueror, he walked thus with the 4 companions to Abraham's shrine, there to demolish the 300 and more idols, and to establish the worship of one God alone among the people of this land. Stretching far away to each horizon beyond the road for most of this bleak and punishing journey, nothing may be sighted beyond rippling dunes of the finest brownish sand. Here and there a Bedouin woman brings her camel to a well. Featureless is the only word to describe the plain across which we were moving. Nothing stood out from the desert to remind us of the centuries since Arabia produced a man who was to become the inspirer of hundreds of millions. We might have been projected back into the very days of the mission. As my faculties seemed suddenly to sharpen, I became aware of the astonishing variety in physiognomy among the surging throng. Uniform in their unstitched ahram sheet, the men with one shoulder bare, there seemed to be almost no 2 people who resembled one another. Blonde, blue-eyed, chunky Syrians and Anatolian peasant types marched along Parthen hillmen with hooked noses and long curly black hair. Sudanese tribesmen, with finely chiseled features and cheek marks denoting their origin, strode beside podgy, round-faced Indians, obviously far more used to sedentary activities. A Javanese under 5 feet tall was dwarfed by a thin, rangy woman with copper-coloured hair who was telling a 99-bead rosary of pale amber. All indications of rank or distinction, manifestation of arrogance or self-seeking, every trace of petty individuality had vanished. This was a collection of people such as even Hollywood could not surely hope to muster. Devoutly anxious as they undoubtedly were to reach Mecca, they were neither a rabble nor a mere chance collection of travelling companions. This much was evident from their behaviour. If one faltered, his fellows would stop and give him a helping hand. There was no wild panic when a truck overturned and strewed its 100 occupants over the patiently plodding foot passengers. Those who immediately surrounded the vehicle stopped and picked up the bruised ones. Nobody seemed seriously hurt. Those who came behind merely made a short detour, without crowding around to see the sight. The calm would, under any other circumstances or anywhere else, have seemed unnatural. Here I did not give it more than a passing thought. This road is one of absolutely first-class quality, and is kept clear of sand by the incessant motor traffic, for there are no railways in southern Saudi Arabia, though the old line from the north, which was wrecked by T.E. Lawrence's Arabs, is now being surveyed with a view to putting it into commission again. On we went, past the interminable column of humanity, as the road climbed sharply into the iron-stained foothills beyond which the holy city lies. This precipitous part was literally hewn from the rocks by bulldozers, which are still working on the road in some places. Through these narrow, twisting, man-made defiles climbs the car, while something like a brief gust of delicious wind seems to move slowly past us. Suddenly, around a bend, looms a sign inscribed in Arabic and English. Stop. Restricted area. Muslims only permitted beyond this point. Saudi guards, some carrying the cane switches characteristic of Nejd, others hugging automatic weapons, come forward to inspect our credentials. Small, wiry men, their martial bearing is well set off by the khaki uniform and green Arab headdress. Arranging transport, guides, and 101 other facilities for up to 1 million pilgrims is a Herculean task, which the pilgrimage administration carries out without any hitch whatever. Matters of identity, documentation, and quarantine are so well attended to that I felt enormous relief that I was not trying to get past this and other posts under false pretenses. It has been said that non-Muslims have penetrated into Mecca undetected. Before believing it, I should have to interview such a person personally. It is not difficult to get fairly full details about the pilgrimage, and then to write it as one's own experience. But I doubt whether anyone other than a Muslim has actually performed the pilgrimage since Burton. While I say it is just possible that an impostor may have done it, I am quite sure that the difficulties today are immensely greater than they were during the time of Turkish suzerainty. Saudi Arabia has all the modern methods of detection and control at her disposal, and she uses them. This is not to say that a surprisingly large number have not tried, as one police official told me. After this point, 14 miles from the city, the ruins of abandoned Turkish forts seem to brood in the baking desert silence. These strong points were raised by the Ottomans in an attempt to combat the brigand menace, but it took Ibn Saud's rough and ready justice to stamp out banditry in the Hejaz. Until the Napoleon of Arabia took over control, robber bands used to swoop down on pilgrim caravans, looting and killing. The performing of the Hajj used to be considered such a dangerous undertaking that pilgrims, before setting out for Arabia, made their wills and said a final goodbye to their families.